Take seats. Good morning, gentlemen. This is coming straight from the top. As you know, in 2003, SARS-CoV had emerged in China and has been identified as having been circulating in horseshoe bats in the vicinity of Laos, North Vietnam, and Yunnan. But scientists have also been able to isolate it from civets, cats, raccoons, and ferret badgers in live animal markets, suggesting that these animals may serve as intermediate hosts, as reported by Wuhan in 2003. And some have suspected raccoon dogs as a possible intermediary host that has made possible zoonosis events transmitting SARS to set off that outbreak in the vicinity of Hong Kong, primarily presenting in discrete clusters involving nosocomial settings with no wider community spread, and raising no suspicion. Nonetheless, the human science community was put on alert to a potential emerging public health threat from coronaviruses. And in 2012, through a dromedary camel intermediary host on the Arabian Peninsula, again presenting primarily in nosocomial settings with no wider community spread, the human world had again erupted into panic with the emergence of MERS. But this will be quite an awakening for mankind as we proceed to launch our boldest initiative yet, hoping to achieve a pandemic declaration by World Health Authorities by mid-March 2020. And gentlemen, this is why you are here today. I will be followed by the S2 to provide an intelligence briefing to update you on the current situation. Good morning. Most of you gentlemen should be very familiar with Renal Office's happiness projection platform, an intermediate horseshoe bat located in Yunnan province, and we shall be using that as a staging area and start point for launching a RAT G13 force projection strike against targets presently identified to be a raccoon dog, Nyctereutes procyon between November and December 2019. This will be an opportune time to strike because many humans will be enjoying their winter holiday and will not be aroused to any early suspicions because both the horseshoe bat and the raccoon dog will be hibernating. And just as surprise is one of the 9 principles of war, all warfare is based upon deception, and we should be able to catch them with their pants down. As the S3 operations officer has related to our staff in intelligence, the plan of attack involves traversing a distance of 1,063 miles straight line distance by road to Wuhan in the Hubei province, and the concept of the operation involves the deployment of 2 strike force teams in a force projection, one traveling the southerly route to Wuhan and the other proceeding along the northerly route for convergence of forces no later than mid-December 2019 under 2 distinct lineage payloads of the RAT G13 virus, but evolved sufficiently to be adaptable to the human physiology, which you shall work out along the journey, for eventual acquisition of a human host, setting off a public health crisis in China with sufficient momentum for phase 1 to compel the declaration of a public health emergency of international concern no later than the end of January, and a declaration of a pandemic no later than mid-March. Phase 2 and Phase 3. Question, shoot Maverick. That's why we want you and Iceman to be strike task force commanders for this rather difficult progression mission. What's your question? That sounds pretty complicated, Commander, and Even using a rat G13 armament to acquire a human host target in the vicinity of Wuhan would require some gain of function to acquire a human host. Good point. Very good point, Maverick, but we have that part covered already, front-loaded in the rat G13. As you may know, we have been focusing upon the angiotensin-converting enzyme 2-ACE2, which is required for human cell entry by binding to the SARS-CoV-2 recombinant unbinding domain, RBD, on the S protein. Any other questions, Hotshots? Nice man. What you got?
Have you considered maybe pangolins? That platform offers some potential.
Good point, Iceman. However, while there are an abundance of bans on pangolins in South Asian countries, we have found that to date only 2 SARS-CoV-2 strains isolated in the vicinity of Guangxi and Guangdong, and it remains unclear whether these viruses cause disease in other animals from spillover, or whether they pose any transmission risk at all to humans. What type of pangolin, Commander? Yes, they were actually smuggled Malayan pangolins, Manus japonica, captured in Guangxi, and termed MPCOB-GX in terms of receptor usage, cell tropism, and pathogenicity in wild-type bulb C mice, human angiotensin converting enzyme 2 or ACE2 transgenic mice, and human ACE2 knock-in mice, and we found that MPCOB-GX can potentially utilize ACE2 from humans, pangolins, civets, bats, pigs, and mice for cell entry, and infect cell lines derived from humans, monkeys, bats, minks, and pigs, at least in theory, given sufficient exposure, and has in fact infected 3 mouse models in experiments, but with only limited pathogenicity, with mild peribronchial and perivascular inflammatory cell infiltration observed in the lungs. Bottom line, this particular SARS-CoV-2 virus from pangolins has at least some potential for interspecies infection, but its pathogenicity is mild in mice, transgenic mice. Even if a human were to catch this virus, based upon experiments by humans with transgenic mice, it is not likely to develop severe lower respiratory tract symptoms that could result in a terminal case. So that should answer your question. Does that answer your question? Any other questions?
How about maybe snakes as an intermediary? King cobra are widely distributed across Southeast Asia, southern China, northern and eastern regions, as well as the western Ghats of India. Traits are nocturnal venomous snakes from the Elapidae family that are only found in Asia, and with widespread distribution across many countries, including India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and China. Iceman. Intelligence sources say that king cobra is the world's largest venomous snake, with adults capable of growing up to 6 meters in length. Quite large, which may be frightening as well. They are widely distributed throughout Southeast Asia on the Malay archipelago, to the exception of territory is located eastward from the Indonesian islands of Java and Sulawesi in southern China, including Insula Henan province and Hong Kong, and in parts of India, in northern and eastern parts of India, and disjunctly in southwestern India along the western Ghats of Tamil Nadu. Bungarus multicinctus, Chinese trait, or mini-banded trait. Bungarus fasciatus, banded trait. And the Bungarus bungaroides, the Himalayan trait. However, despite the name, in China banded trait and the Himalayan trait are far more medically important because they are more common and therefore create a larger threat to humans and other animals there, which will be our area of operations. This may sound like an opportunity, but not to cut you off, but coronaviruses only infect birds and mammals, and so that plan is a no-go at this station. Roger. Roger that, Commander. Good. Then I'll be followed by the S3 to present the remaining parts of the operations briefing. Had some good discussion, gentlemen, and you have helped to eliminate some of the other topics I had intended to cover in the operations brief. On this joint strike force assault on Wuhan, we will not be able to rely on a zoonosis, either with snakes, like the king cobra or Chinese grape, or the mail-in pangolin, unfortunately. So, how do you expect me, an Iceman, to get a horseshoe bat coronavirus to traverse over ground over 1,000 miles from Yunnan and converge in Wuhan no later than mid-December? You know, Skipper, the Rhinolophus aphanus began to hibernate in November and will be offline. That's why we chose you, Maverick and Iceman. I'm afraid you'll have to go inverted. Bullshit. Iceman, I told you about that asymptomatic spread, and this is the last time I'm going to warn you about that bullshit. Are we clear? I said, are we clear?
Crystal clear.
Good. Now, since we have two distinguished Top Gun graduates, I need to inform you that as difficult as this may seem, this operation scenario presents another obstacle for you two to overcome. Our planners have determined that you will have to deliver a payload, an infectious dose of at least 100,000 particles to infect just about anything from Syrian hamsters to rhesus monkeys, which will probably require an exposure time of at least an hour to infect just one target, and you cannot be detected while you are doing this.
Wait, Skip.
Over 1,000 miles, two separate routes carrying two distinct payloads, departing a start point in Yunnan for a release point in Wuhan by mid-December, moving this payload from a hibernating horseshoe bat to a hibernating raccoon dog, and along the way having to provide an exposure of at least an hour with another species to deliver at least 100,000 particles in an infectious dose. That's the size. And Skipper, you expect me, an Iceman, to do this by mid-December? That's your mission, Maverick, should you choose to accept it. If we didn't have a Mission Impossible, we wouldn't have selected you two. So, make it happen. It is possible that perhaps one strike force team will not survive this very difficult journey, but we only have to have one successful strike, and the first phase of the mission shall be accomplished, and we can move on to the pandemic declaration with world proliferation. We are counting on you. Any questions? This concludes this mission brief. Good luck, gentlemen.
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.